introduce Jame Gaddis. Jame is with Synergistic Virtual Consulting. Got to meet her last week, right, Jame? That's all right, take your time.
That's good. Yeah.
How many of you have ever looked for jobs?
Yeah.
How many of you have ever wondered who it is that's actually reviewing any of the resumes for that type of thing? How many of you have ever had to write job descriptions or do any of that kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah.
So the job descriptions and all the virtual side of HR is what Jame's company does. And I think we'd all agree we'd rather hire that stuff out than do it ourselves. You know, it's a lot more efficient that way. As entrepreneurs, what are you going to do as an entrepreneur? Do what you do well and stay doing it well. And the stuff you don't do, yeah, find somebody that loves it and outsource it. Don't try to be all things to all people. Ready?
I think I'm ready to look in.
All right.
All right. Well, everybody, what? Okay. Good morning. I am Jame Gathers, and my company is Synergetic Virtual Consulting, formerly Jame Gathers Consulting. Let me ask a question. How many people in this room love HR, love sorting through resumes, love policy manuals? Anybody?
Yes, you.
That would be me. Yeah. So what I do is I empower entrepreneurs and small business owners to live out their dream while living mine. And of course, my dream is to write that policy manual, to, enforce your policies for you, help you find the right hire. Not necessarily the termination part, that's not really my dream, but I will help you with that. So here's the problem. 66% of small business owners are responsible for wearing multiple hats. So you're the accounting person, you're the HR person, you may attempt to be the IT person, that always goes bad. But, so you're trying to service your clients, but you're also trying to do 15 other jobs as well. If you were going to hire an HR person, just an HR generalist, you're looking at roughly $54,000 and up a year, depending on their experience. It doesn't account for taxes, benefits, doesn't account for any of that. If you're looking to have your first hire, you're responsible for federal requirements, whether you know that or not. And it's not like the 15 and up or the 50 and up, but if you have one employee, you are now responsible for not discriminating against them and knowing that you're equally paying your employees. So let's say you have a female employee and then you hire a male employee. They do the same job, they have the same background, but you knew the male employee longer, you pay them more. You could be in trouble. So that's something you have to think about even when you have one employee. So what I do, I go in, I evaluate your systems. I check out your policy handbook, hopefully that you have one. If you have one employee, you should have one. Even if it's your cousin, your brother, maybe not your child, but you get what I'm saying. I go in, I evaluate what you have, and then I walk you through what you should have and how we can get you to where you need to be. I've worked with clients who have had their policy handbooks in place, said they were enforcing rules, but they were selectively enforcing rules. Can't do that. So I had to come in and say, you can't do that. I've had people who haven't hired their first employee yet, and they think, well, I'm small. I don't really need a handbook. I don't want to lock myself in. Can't do that, because when you don't lock yourself in, when you don't have policies in place, you're setting yourself up for failure, because you don't set an expectation and you don't have anything to fall back on. So that's what I do. I come in and I tell people the things they typically don't want to hear, but it's for their own protection, and I help them to be a better employer because they're setting expectations, they're employing legally and fairly, and everyone eventually is happy. Not in the onset, but eventually. So just a couple of examples of how I've actually helped clients. So one client, new business, no employees. He thought that he needed to go in and hire everyone and make everyone a W-2 employee. when technically he didn't. For the positions that he had, and this is a special situation, this is usually not the case, his people that he needed to bring on board, they needed to be C-99s. Saved him money on what would have been expenses for benefits and other taxes he would have paid if he would have hired them as W-2s. Second situation, client, 47 employees, no handbook. They had a 28% difference between the lowest and the highest paid employee. The highest paid employee had been there less time than the oldest employee. They did the exact same job, had the exact same credentials. Couldn't do that. So we had to go in, we had to do a restructuring, we had to create structure, we had to go in and create policies. They had a pending EEOC charge, which was not fun to deal with, but fortunately, it came out in their favor. But yeah, so I went in and I worked with them. Oop, I just did that. Thank you. Went in and worked with them, and it was a struggle. It took us 9 months to get everything straightened out because they were resistant to putting policies in place and actually enforcing them. They were resistant because they didn't want to be held accountable as an employer. But we got it done. So, yeah, so that is pretty much my presentation. It was very short and to the point. And how the remote one works, so anyway. Ready for questions?
Yes. So when is it a law that you must have those policies? And you, I mean, I know that you don't, I know as an employer you don't have to have a handbook if you have 4 employees, but like you said, you leave yourself liable, you know, because you don't have a policy about a certain thing. But when is it that you must and have to require to do it legally by law? How many employees is it?
You are not required by law to have a policy handbook.
Not by any number of employees?
You are not.
Oh, okay.
The trick to that is, though, if you have something that comes up, let's say you have an employee and they are terminated, and they're going through the unemployment process, and this is someone that they did something totally wrong, deserve to be terminated, and so you rightfully don't want them to receive unemployment. You say, they violated our rule. Where's your handbook? Well, we verbally communicated it. It doesn't exist. So at the same, you know, you're not protecting yourself by not having it, and you're not setting clear expectations, you know, also. Who's hands up first? Back here?
So, regarding, I guess, best HR practices, how do you provide any services when it comes to instructing, like, HR managers, HR leaders on how to properly brief the employees on how important it is to look at the handbook in regards to, like you said, a situation of firing, or like if they're asking for more pay, things of that nature. What I'm really getting at is, do you like give that push to HR directors to really kind of have more hands-on approach, have advanced information disseminated to avoid, you know, recurring events of employees dropping out, leaving, feeling like they're not valued or anything like that? I know that's kind of a long question.
So just to make sure I understand your question is, do I push the employers or the managers or the heads of the HR departments to go through the handbook with the employees so they understand what the policies are? Is that your question?
Yeah, it's more of a gentle glide. But more of an informative approach, like teaching them skills on how to actually do this. Because what I've seen in a lot of different companies, or outside of that, is that here's a handbook, here's a bunch of paperwork. Never has anybody really gone into the value of that handbook and how it can protect an employee. It's not just a guideline for the company, it's for the employee.
Okay, I understand. So my approach is this. When I go in the door, whether we're creating a new handbook, updating an existing handbook, or just keeping things as they are, My question is always, have they read and understood the handbook? Because everyone knows when you get that employee handbook, there's a signature page that says, I have read and understood the policies within this handbook. Everyone has one. But most companies, you're right, don't sit down and say, we're gonna read this together. For example, this client that had 47 employees that didn't have a handbook, when we created one, I insisted we have a staff meeting. And it was a 2-hour meeting where we all sat together and we read page by page through the handbook, and then everyone signed in the form. The purpose of that is, one, people can say, no one explained this to me, no one went over this with me, or I've heard I didn't sign that. That happens all the time. And the purpose of the handbook shouldn't be just to come after the employees. It should be to set the expectations. If you don't make sure your employees know the policies and have actually been briefed on them, you're not setting expectations. You're just trying to protect yourself from writing. So yes, I strongly advise my clients, and I actually do it for them. I'll go through the handbook, answer any questions they have, even sidebar questions about, can my employer do this? I'm like, yeah, they can.
So as a frequent startup founder, I hear all this, and my first instinct is, gosh, this just sounds like another barrier. Like, I'm just going to go with contract employees instead of like actual employees and avoid this problem. And I have to think that there's a lot of people who are thinking sort of the same thing. So how can you alleviate that mindset and say, like, no, you can start with like regular employees and do payroll?
Well, I think the first question that any employer has to ask themselves, and what they need to know for sure, is whether or not that position that they're hiring for qualifies as a contractor. Depending on the responsibilities of the position, whether they are supervised by someone in your organization, or depending on where they work, or if they're supervising other members, or if they're, required to adhere to your policies, you have to be really careful about whether or not you're classifying someone as a 1099 as a contractor or a W-2. So my first question is always, have you taken the test, the DOL test, to see if they qualify? And even when you go down with a list of questions, it's not an extensive list, but it's a pretty good list of questions the DOL has of employee versus contractor. Even when you go down that list, you still could be wrong. So I say, make sure you're careful and you know for sure. If someone could be classified as a 1099, I say go that route, because it's an easier way to go, and it has fewer headaches than the W-2. Now, of course, when you go the 1099 route, you also lose a certain amount of control. So that's something else you have to consider. So there's pros and cons on both sides. Did I answer your question?
Well, I'm kind of more wondering, like, how painless can you make this to do what you should do? Because I hear what you're saying, and to me it puts this added barrier of fear of, like, I don't really even want to do this, and it's hard to start a business. Everybody here who's starting one knows like everything that they're struggling with. Right. And so when you're saying that, I'm saying, like, it's really more of a question of how simple can you make this for us as owners of businesses that are young and fledgling and dealing with a million problems in the world.
Okay, well, I'll say this. With my clients, there are 3 options. I can provide you with the documents that you need, that being your handbook customized to you, your different forms that you'll need during the hiring process, through the employment process. I can do that, or I can do on-site or virtual. With the on-site, it is really painless. That's the most painless option, because what I do is I come in, I sit down with the owner of the company or whoever's responsible for meeting with me, and we go through things as they are. I work virtually. I try to stay out of their space, out of their face. And then once everything has been created and things are being implemented and rolled out, I come in and I do that for them. So they're not having to sit and having to go through every meeting and every conversation, although I do hope they will sit on the meetings, because it's great for the owner of the company to be there, because it shows that you actually are invested. But yeah, I make it as painless as possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you say maybe a good way to summarize that could be, like, as a business owner, entrepreneur, startup, like, if you don't have these in place, once you get 5 years down the road, and then something happens, like, then it's a lot more pain there versus here to establish branding, identity, policies and procedures now versus like, because then you're like behind the ball, something could happen, it's ugly at that point.
Usually, if you don't start off on the right foot, you won't realize it until you've done something really wrong when you're in trouble and it costs you money. That's usually how it happens. And so that can be anything from you started your company, it was just you, and you had a couple family members, then maybe you hired a friend, and then hired someone they knew, and then all of a sudden you have 10 employees. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm getting close to that magic 15. But, you know, okay. And the next thing you know, you have a busy season, and you need to hire more people. If you hire 5 more people, you have your 15, and then you don't have policies in place, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. When you hire 1 employee, you have requirements. When you hire 15, you have requirements. When you hire 20, you have requirements. That's not even the 50 that people always think is the dark place that you go once, you know, regulation kicks in. So it's important to start from day one on the right foot. And not just as a business owner trying to stay out of trouble, it's much harder for the employees who've been with you. Let's say they've been there a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they had no policies, no real requirements. It was just like a free-for-all. When you try to implement structure, it's much harder for those employees to adjust. I see it all the time.
I really like this voluntary idea. It's really exciting. Like, you've got so much technical knowledge in HR, and I'm just interested because you put that slide in. I know HR people, they make like $60,000 a year, and that's a lot. So how are you, like, are you working a volume of people? How are you really making a lot of money off of this?
Well, bless you. So for me, it's not so much, it replaced my salary that I made as an HR and accounting manager. But for me, my whole purpose is I want to be able to provide HR services to small businesses that may not be able to afford that salary. And so by working with multiple clients, that's how I make up my income. But I try to keep the pricing as reasonable as possible for them, because if they could afford a full-time HR person, they hire one. But a lot of times they can't afford it, so they have the admin assistant doing HR work, or they're doing HR work, and it's not working out the way it should. So does that answer your question?
Because I know someone right now who's in a class action lawsuit. He fired 3 incompetent employees, and they filed a class action lawsuit. He's currently being sued. He's going to lose his business, and so that's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to think that, like, you're out here, and I don't know. What is your, like, in the Augusta area? Are there other businesses like this, or is this like do you have any competition when it comes to this type of stuff?
I do have competition. They're not, the competition that I have, they work with larger clients than what I work with. I don't know of anyone in particular who specifically works with small businesses with less than 50 employees. That's what I do. But I know there are other firms in the area. And it's, you know, you mentioned the class action lawsuit. I think it's what, 90% of EEOC charges result in a settlement. I think that's what the stat was.
Yeah, it looks like that's the way it's going to go.
Yeah, so you got to be careful. Yeah.
When you work with a customer, do you normally have like a 30 to 90 day plan, or is it a consistent? Do you try to aim for a consistent thing where they have you on retainer or monthly subscription or something like that?
Okay, so my goal is to keep costs as low as possible for them. So what I like to do is I like to do 90 days at a time. Okay. And we come up with a plan, and I give them upfront pricing and everything, the hours included for each month for 90 days. And then at the end of that 90-day period, we go back and we reevaluate. I do that for 2 reasons. One, like I said, to keep costs down, but also so that we can reevaluate the relationship. If we get to the end of 90 days and they are up and running and they don't need me anymore, then that's an expense that they may not need. Other people who, you know, don't want to, because my goal is, I didn't say this before, I like to bring someone in, train them on everything that I put in place so they can run with it. So I'm not like a non-stop, never-ending relationship with them. That's not my goal. But once we get to the end of the first 90 days, we review the relationship, see if there are additional things we need to do, see what progress we've made, and if everyone wants to move forward, we do. If not, then I wrap it up and give them a summary.
Is there any kind of like accredited training program you can offer? Like maybe something that where you can go in and teach that office receptionist how to handle these HR problems better, and then they get some kind of certification or something like that?
I've never thought about doing a certification. I do train someone. Typically, I like to hire someone, bring someone in, because usually if they had someone with the skill set to handle things correctly, they wouldn't need me. So I'll usually recruit someone for them, bring them in, and usually in that last 30 days, work with them and get them up to speed on what they need to know.
So what are you currently doing right now to get the word out about your business?
Let's see, I am on social media, and I'm talking to you today. And I have my website, and
is it mainly just word of mouth is like your biggest?
Word of mouth has been great, yes. Yeah,
yes.
I'd say I think about 80% of my clients have come from word of mouth.
That's good.
So.
And how long have you been up and running with this?
My first company, which was Jame Consulting, I started that company in 2013, and then I rebranded last year and changed the name to take myself out of it. So that was last year. So, yeah.
So you're really not exactly a startup. You're kind of at that next stage where you're a little bit beyond the startup, maybe not fully where you want to be, but in 5 years in, you're...
Yeah, I'm not like brand new, no.
So have you given any thought to really networking and trying to build relationships with like accountants, financial planners, insurance benefits brokers? Because being in that industry, I feel like that a lot of those 50 and under business employers are a lot of our target market, but like this is the first time that I've really heard anything like this, and just even like you educating those folks on the different rules, like if you have 15, these are things that you need to have in place so that we could educate our clients on those things and possibly be able to refer you out as a resource for that. Or maybe even do like some joint workshops for business owners and things like that.
That is a great suggestion, and a lot of my referrals have come from brokers for insurance. And so to me, that's a partnership, because I'm gonna have small business clients who eventually are gonna need benefits, and they know people who are eventually gonna need HR.
Right.
So yeah, my referrals have come from them, but I've never thought about doing a workshop, kind of double team in that way. That is a great idea, thank you.
Can you just, we have to wrap things up, but can you just answer the final question, which is what we can do as a community to help you? I think a lot of people want to follow up with you about this, so just remind us again how to get in contact with you and what you need from the audience.
Okay, well, I will pass out cards in just a moment. And if you want to check out the website, it's synergeticvirtualconsulting.com. Can't forget the name. And I am basically looking for referrals. If I can help anyone, whether they're looking to contract services or have a quick question, I'm glad to help. Anything I can do to help a small business owner stay in